What's up, future shredlords? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. This is kind of an interesting and cool video. Listen, everybody knows, or you should know, that I'm kind of wacky crazy about the human rights and stuff like that. And just, it's the law. The law interests me now because you have to make all these really interesting sort of legal, logical arguments. And you're pitting your skills against another human being in sort of like this word chess game, if you will, right? So I'm into stuff like that. I like books and chess and, Scrabble and all the really geeky stuff, words and all the rest of it, right? So that's my thing. I like to be intellectual. It strokes my ego, I guess, when I do it right. Sometimes fail, but you know how it is. But the thing is that basically after COVID-19, and the way the government acted, I was like, never again will I ever comply with the government. And the next time they try to do something like that, and they try to apply it against me, because I got absolutely destroyed in a divorce, right? So that was the first drubbing. I mean, it was so bad that my own family and my ex and stuff like that, they like metaphorically put me on a raft and then just sailed me out into the bay a little bit, and then like train the howitzers on me and just blow me out of the water. It was just not good, right? So that was the first real experience with the law where I just got absolutely killdozered. Just a red smudge on the asphalt. And of course, it took a long time and I became resentful and all the rest of the stuff. I went through a major depression, but I kind of stumbled on human rights as like this Hail Mary attempt to try to figure out how to deal with all of the aftermath from the divorce. So that's kind of what put my feet on the human rights thing. And then, of course, fast forward from like 2010-ish, 2013-ish, all the way up to like 2025. And after the whole COVID-19 thing, I'm just like, I'm not complying with the government anymore. You want me to fill out the census? Make me. You want me to comply with this jury duty stuff? Make me. Right? Taxes is a little more delicate. I'm working on it. But I have other fish to fry right now that are more important. But it's on the list, absolutely. So you know what I mean? That's my position now. I don't just take, I don't comply with the government, I guess I should say. I just don't do it, Now listen, if the Red Army shows up on the coast of Canada, the military's like, we need men. You know what I mean? That's a different story. But when the government's like, obey us, slave, well, that fucking gets my hackles up. And I just don't play that game. No. No. What did you say? You know what I mean? Like, I'm done with the authoritarianism. I'm done with it. So in spring this year, I got a notice over there for jury duty. And of course, me being a dick, I'm just immediately sent a letter to them based on human rights. And I'm just like, I don't want to do jury duty. And you can't force me into it because of legal recognition. I don't have to comply with this duty. It's laid at the feet of the citizen and the resident. And I don't need to be that. I can remain in my full legal capacity as a natural person, right? Which is a guarantee under Article 16 of the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, which is actionable in Canada under the Charter. It's actionable in the States too. But you have to bring a lawsuit against the government in order to bring those rights into play in a legal manner. Okay? Because you got to understand the way human rights works. You got to strive. That means fight the government for the promotion and protection of human rights. So basically the de facto position for the state is that we're going to make laws. We know that they're going to violate your human rights. We don't care. We're going to keep doing it until you make us stop by filing a lawsuit. That's where the covenants come in. And the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which basically lays out how you're supposed to notice the state parties when they're infringing on your rights. That's step one. Sending a notice being like, cease and desist or I'll sue you. Right? So that's what happened. Obviously, within the first day, I jumped on the computer. I typed up a 2-page letter. And I'll show you at the end of the video. Without me talking, I'll just do a screen cap of the email and stuff like that. And the letter and whatnot. But the simple fact of the matter is that I was like, that's one and done. And they're like, nah, you can't opt out of this process. I knew it was coming anyways. And I just politely declined again. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Okay? If you want to file a lawsuit against me, if you want to give me a summons and bring me before a judge and justify your position, okay, we'll argue about it because I'm acting as a human rights defender. I believe your position is untenable as far as the Constitution is concerned. That's a reasonable position. You can be like, I don't believe you have the authority to do what you're doing. So, of course, after that, they came back one more time. They're like, nah, you have to do this. And that's when I dropped a bomb on them. So I went right to the Juries Act, right? Which is the legislation that controls what goes on, you know, what the government can do with respect to when it comes to jury duty, right? And of course, I zeroed in on this one major level sort of human rights infringement, which is the first 10 days of jury duty was unpaid. And then afterwards, it's $50 a day. And so I made a really sophisticated sort of human rights argument to be like, listen, this isn't in conformity with your actual human rights obligations, because there's no real argument you can say where someone has to work for you, like labor under your direction for free. That is just not a concept that actually exists in Western society. I'm like, I don't even know. You know, that's servitude or slavery. It could go either way. You know, like slavery, I would imagine, is you're owned. So, but I mean, aren't you basically owned if they're like, do this now, and then you're not allowed to say no? So it's a bit of a gray area there, but I said it was servitude. That's where where you're not allowed to make your own choices, basically. I was going to say something else, but that one's just as good. Right, so that's it. And so after I mentioned it to them that the unpaid stuff, nobody works for free. It's fair compensation for services rendered. And I'm like, the $50 a day. I'm like, that was established in 1990. I'm like, you've devalued our currency by like 50% since 1990. This is not a joke. Okay? And I'm like, so even by your own metric, I'm like, you're basically paying us $25 a day by 1990s money. I'm like, it should be more like about $100 a day or plus. Right? And I'm like, there's other issues here too. Like the judges' wives are basically given blanket exemptions from actually having to, do this duty. I'm like, why? That's arbitrary. Just don't put them on the same jury as whatever case their husband or whatever their wife is working. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about here? It's everybody else except for this select group of people. Yeah, no, that's arbitrary, and you're giving them a privilege that is unwarranted. They're citizens, they're residents. Get to work, right? That's what I'm talking about. That's not permissible, man. You can't be like, there's rules for you, but not for me. As soon as you see that, it's a human rights violation. If you're good enough with human rights, you can basically kick their teeth in. And that's the end of the story. And there are more of them, right? And then I didn't hear anything from these people. I'm like, okay, I scared them away. Good enough. 2 days ago, I was arguing with Grok over human rights, because this is how I tighten up my human rights arguments, because Grok, which is Twitter's AI bot or whatever it is basically one of the most statist-oriented sort of entities on the internet. It loves the state. It hates human rights, right? So there's no better person to argue against and try to make your point, because it'll argue tooth and nail, which makes you have to focus in, like laser focus, and come up with the most interesting sort of like ideas to just get them that gotcha kind of situation, right? It's great. Anyways, we're talking about jury duty, and I was going to throw it in its face, this 10 days unpaid stuff. It's contrary to human rights. And he's like, well, yeah, but it's not though. He's like, as of October 1st, it's $120 a day on day one. And And I'm like, no. I'm like, when did they change the law? And so I went there and I type up the law and everything. I'm like, it doesn't say that at all. It says it's $50 a day after the first 10 days because the first 10 days are unpaid. And he's like, no, check out this source. And then I clicked on it and I'm like, this is from the Ministry of Justice, and started scrolling down. I'm like, I don't see anything here. This is BS. He's just hallucinating again, basically lying. Scroll down and no, sure as shit, there it is. Starting day one, $120 a day. Now, I sent that letter in the beginning of July. Like, I sent the original letter telling them to piss off in like the mid-spring kind of situation, and then it kind of back and forth, for a few months, because you know how the government is. They just don't respond for like 3 weeks or something like that. Then they send me like, no, you have to do it, and then I sent them another one. So that went on. And so that got us to about July. And then I sent them the email to end all emails. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It should be more like $100 a day. And I don't work for free, man. So negative. And so then, of course, they made the notice that they were going to increase it in July of this year. And then they increased it. And of course, now here's the thing. It's incredibly coincidental that a law that's been on the books since 1990 would just randomly be changed. So I asked the AI to do an in-depth sort of investigation as to all the sort of government information with respect to debates or questions or papers or anything like that talking about increasing the pay for jury duty from $50 a day to $120, and then starting it on day one, because that's a significant expense. I can get them out. I can, to the government. If the first 10 days were completely free and you have about 12 people on the jury, well, now all of a sudden it's 120 times 12 times 10 that you now have to pay out for every single jury. Now, comparably to what you were getting away with before, and then after that, after the first 10 days, it stays at 120, not 50, right? So you're getting smoked again. So it's great, right? So I'm just like, what are the chances? The $120 a day. I said 100, and I'm like, I'm being reasonable, and that was just inflationary, strictly inflationary. So the 120 makes sense. The timing too. No debates, no term papers, nothing. There's nothing at all. It was just like one day, boom, they're like, we have to increase the money. And then I'm like, this is weird. Talking to the AI, I'm like, this is weird. This is not how the government works. It takes like years for them to do anything. They debate stuff and then they wrangle and they drag it out so they can get paid and all the rest of this nonsense. And AI was like, you're right. This is incredibly strange. She's like, I did a comparison with respect to other situations throughout the past 20 years where they've done similar things. He's like, the legislative process was quite significant, and they still had the same authority to just increase the money if they wanted to through ministerial power. So in this case, they exercised the ministerial power and just sidestepped the entire democracy aspect and just raised the money up because they have the authority to do that under statute. But on all the other situations, a lot of them, there was debate and sort of like a refining of the idea, at least input from the other politicians. I was just like, wow. You know what I mean? So, what are the chances? What are the chances that after 30 plus years that they would just randomly one day in the middle of July, after I sent them a letter kicking their teeth and using human rights, a real human rights argument that they probably never even seen before, and then boom, it just goes up. I was like, that's hilarious. So it looks like I got the law changed. Looks like I did a little favor for Ontario. You can thank me later, buy me a coffee kind of situation. I'm just glad that it actually sort of panned out. That's the thing. Like, conceivably speaking, I'm probably one of the only people that would actually know how to do this in Ontario. That's not a joke. Like, this information is so esoteric at this point that almost nobody knows it. People laugh in my face on a regular basis when I tell them about the power of human rights. But I just did that with a couple emails and a letter. What does that tell you about the power of human rights? Think about that. Think about how much money the government was able to basically extortion from the people doing their duty for decades. Right? Like even $50 a day, that's a slap in the face. Even by 1990s sort of money standards, $50 a day? Are you kidding me? What's 8 times 15? Okay? That's an 8-hour day times $15 an hour. That's what basically above minimum wage would be. So obviously, if you want to attract the best and the brightest to be able to do this job seriously, like adjudicate and sort of pass on some kind of judgment to the judge or whatever, I don't know like how it works. You know what I mean? Assess the situation. You want to have good people, so you should be paying them well, just like you pay the judge well and the lawyers at $400 an hour. So shut up, right? That's my point. Whenever you see injustice, when you see inequality like that, when you see a disparity of equity, you have to step in and kick their teeth in. Otherwise, you get the kind of dystopian hellscape we're living in right now. And that's not the only time, man. I've been fighting these guys with respect to this landlord-tenant board stuff. Now, I'm almost finished my lawsuit, and it was a very lengthy process because I anticipated a whole bunch of shenanigans with respect to that, because this is even worse than the one that I just laid the beating on them. But I did that first. And that's the thing. I imagine that I'm on the radar now because I filed a lawsuit in the federal courts under the Constitution, and they shot it down, but they didn't actually follow the law. And so I filed another constitutional complaint with the Judicial Council that got accepted, being like, you didn't keep up with your human rights obligations under the Constitution. And I made another really killer argument that just is going to snap heads. So here's the thing. I'm on the radar for sure. I know it. And now all of a sudden it's twice. That's twice. So the thing is like, granted, there's a lot of work that goes into this stuff. That's a lot of reading and whatnot. It gets a lot more interesting once you're good at it. But the real payoff is that you can handle your business and you can just lay waste to the government when they feel like just trampling all over your life with impunity. You know what I mean? I think it's a fair and reasonable expectation that any human being should be allowed to just get on with their life. And it is what it is. Absent any sort of like complications from the government, unless it's under a contractual obligation, like you already entered into recognition, you're like, yeah, I'll do that. And then you reneged, or it's criminal. But if it's like, oh, you're speeding or whatever it is, or you didn't wear your seatbelt, you know what I mean? And I'll leave it at that. I think this is probably the 10th time I brought this up, but there was this hilarious TV sort of news, interview situation going on at the gas station in the United States in like the 1970s or whatever it was, right? So it was rural, right? These people were definitely salt of the earth. It wasn't in the city. And that's when the seatbelt licenses, like the mandatory seatbelt licenses or requirements came in. You know what I mean? And so they're like, well, what do you think? He's like, I hate this commie fascist nonsense. And at first I was just like, man, wow, just shoot yourself in the foot. But then I got thinking, is it really the government's position to try to protect you and stuff like that? Just because you're wearing the seatbelt doesn't mean that you're not going to suffer the worst of it. You know what I mean? What happens if it's even worse because you survive? Now, listen, you do you, but that's my point. At what point in time are we going to basically claw back agency? We make our own decisions as long as they come with a modicum of common sense. And that's really what I'm getting at here. If you make a reasonable argument, then human rights will prevail. And if you do what I did there, and I'm basically pretty sure it was me, and you'll see it at the end, then you do society a bonus, right? I help people. I just helped a lot of people. probably hundreds every single year from facing some sort of financial hardship by getting, roped into jury duty and then being forced to work for the government for free. So I used 15 years worth of studying the Constitution and human rights law to make an eloquent human rights argument against a lot of the unconstitutional edicts they're making in the Juries Act, and then sent them a letter, and then they just immediately backed down. And then they're like, well, we clearly have to change the law here because this is a serious problem, because this isn't just, gray area with respect to human rights. Forcing people to work for free is serious, right? Which is why you saw them change the law, change that amount immediately. Because anybody else would have been like, yeah, there's something fundamentally wrong there, man. You're forcing me to engage in this duty for you because the obligation is upon the state party, but I'm not being compensated. That's wrong. You get paid. Everybody in the government gets paid. When do they show up to work for free for 10 days? Never. I mean, they take way more than they give. So, you know what I mean? That's why, for the first time, the ministry probably looked at an argument that was made by a layman and was like, this is very serious. I don't think I want to mess with this. And so they just did the right thing. Boom, done. Which, can you construe it as being the right thing 30 plus years after the fact? I mean, who thought up that stupid law in the first place? And here's the thing. We already were signed on to the international covenants in 1976, and that law was written in 89. So again, I said it. The government will absolutely violate your human rights, and they'll do all kinds of egregious nonsense and be like, no, we're justified in doing this until you stop them, until you stop them. Today, Ontario benefited from my recalcitrance to be like, fuck off. I don't want to fucking kneel before you. You're not my fucking master. That's just who I am now. Tomorrow, it's going to be the government of Ontario and the landlord-tenant board. Later on, it'll probably be the federal court. After I get back this information with respect to the Judicial Council, I'll just file another lawsuit against the judge, being like, you blocked my access to justice and you extended the legal process unnecessarily in contravention of one of the most basic rules of the court. That's like number 2. Expedite the legal process because it's expensive and stressful. And there's too many other things to get done. And that's just it. You got to be a dog with a bone. Get in there. Fight. So I thought that was a cool story. And I thought that was hella weird when Grok was like, nah, it's up to $120 a day. I'm like, I couldn't believe that. And then I went to a completely different one. It was ChatGPT. And I did the whole research because it's much better at that on it. And I was just shocked again. I was just like, I can't believe this. Now, listen, it's not actually written into law. So remember that. At any point in time, they could renege and be like, well, we don't want to give you the 120. We're going to give you $0. Take us to court. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So very interesting. Stick around at the very end here. I'm going to do a quick little screen capture of the email chain, and you can just look at it and stuff like that. And I'll just flash up the attachment, which was the... which was the PDF I sent them and stuff like that, showing it's a couple pages kind of deal. And I'll show you more specifically just the actual email where I make the argument, and you can read it for yourself and see how you can start to use human rights to basically bring the government to its knees. If people knew these skills, the ostrich thing going on in BC, that'd be over right now. The people in Richmond, BC, also where the native band wants to take over their private property because apparently their ancestors fished there. The human rights would instantly defeat that stupid argument. Any sort of medical tyranny like COVID-19, human rights defeats it. Taxes, any type of taxes. That's Article 1.2 and Article 47. So obviously there's a huge benefit there. The question is how tenacious are you with respect to, digging into this information and, getting sort of like to the point where we have to get, if we want to live in a righteous and moral society, then it's on us to basically create that society. Just to give the rule over to lesser men, like in the Lord of the Rings, you saw what happened to Gondor. And that's a perfect analogy for what's going on in North America and Europe, Australia. We're all in decline because we've become too apathetic and allowed buffoons to basically represent our interests. And we have to stop. And this is anecdotally a way of doing that, I guess. And more importantly is it doesn't matter if it was me or anybody else. The only thing that actually matters is this unconstitutional and sort of anti-human rights practice of forcing people into servitude and then to work for the state for free for 10 days is over. And now people are receiving fair compensation. Job's done. Check out the email.